October 5th, 1944, over Asselt, Netherlands. The autumn sky burned pale gold above northern Belgium as contrails stretched like fading scars across the early morning horizon. Each American pilot within the 127th Wing sensed the hum of war resonating through cold aluminum frames cutting the October air. Below them, rivers twisted like veins through farmland scarred by months of artillery fire and retreating German columns collapsing westward toward the Rhine. Captain Don Blakesley adjusted his oxygen mask, his eyes scanning the thinning cloud cover for signs of Luftwaffe resistance that day's escort run might provoke. His formation of P-51 Mustangs, silver silhouettes glinting under the sun, guarded a column of B-17 bombers lumbering toward Münster. Radio chatter crackled with coordinates and warnings, but nothing prepared them for what streaked out of the haze moments later. A gleaming aircraft, moving impossibly fast, tore through their altitude like lightning, ripping a curtain of silk, its engines leaving behind a strange, pulsating roar, unfamiliar to piston-driven veterans of the European front. For an instant, the pilots believed it to be experimental ordnance, some unmanned projectile Germany had devised to terrorize the Allied advance. Then its outline emerged clearly, twin nacelles glowing red beneath swept wings, its motion erratic, yet controlled with deadly precision. It was the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter, and in that fleeting encounter, every Allied pilot understood warfare had entered a terrifying new dimension. The Mustang engine screamed as throttles pushed forward, but the propellers could barely summon pursuit velocity beyond 440 miles per hour. The German jet surged ahead effortlessly, its speed exceeding 540 miles per hour, climbing away until it vanished like a phantom swallowed by the stratosphere. Over the radio, disbelief echoed in fragmented exclamations. Veteran aces stunned by the sight of an enemy machine defying every law they had known since the Battle of Britain. In London, intelligence officers had received scattered reconnaissance about new propulsion units under development near Augsburg, but few believed such a craft could fly operationally. Now, over Asselt, proof sliced through the morning calm like a prophecy fulfilled too late. The sky fell silent again, bombers pressing onward, their escorts shaken by an adversary that no skill seemed able to chase. Yet beneath their awe, a question formed quietly among the Mustang squadrons. If it could fly faster than death, could it also survive it? October 6th, 1944, Debden Airfield, England. Morning fog clung to the damp grass as engineers gathered around a chalkboard, sketching outlines of the mysterious jet that had vanished into the northern sky. Reports from returning P-51 pilots poured across the intelligence table, each account repeating identical phrases. Twin engines under the wings, incredible climb rate, no visible propeller, unnatural sound, and velocity unmatched by any known aircraft. The Royal Air Force liaison confirmed that ground observers near Eindhoven had sighted silver contrails impossible to trace by acoustic signature, proving it was no hoax of frightened airmen. Technicians debated wildly over fuel consumption, speculating that such thrust required experimental synthetic mixtures known to burn at intolerable temperatures inside fragile turbines. American officers listened grimly, realizing that this mechanical marvel might represent the final desperate attempt of a crumbling Reich to reclaim its fading sky. Colonel Hubert Zemke ordered reconnaissance over Munich's outskirts where photographic evidence hinted at strange runways constructed with reinforced concrete and unusual fuel tanks. By evening, decoded Luftwaffe communications confirmed a project under the Air Ministry designation Me 262 Schwalbe, meaning swallow, a name deceptively gentle for such a machine of predation. The following day, intelligence couriers from the 8th Air Force delivered technical notes captured from abandoned German test sites near Kassel. The documents described engines called Junkers Jumo 004, turbines capable of producing thrust previously unimaginable to Allied designers, still refining propeller-driven reliability. Yet hidden between performance figures lay fatal warnings. Operational lifespan barely 25 flight hours, compressor blades prone to disintegration, ignition instability during acceleration, and catastrophic flameouts whenever throttle control exceeded narrow tolerance limits. At Debden, Pilots crowded briefing rooms, studying hastily drawn silhouettes projected onto canvas screens by flickering slide lamps. The realization sank deeply that brute speed could not be matched through conventional pursuit. Instead, understanding would be their weapon. Flight leaders instructed observers to monitor airfields rather than airspace, predicting that such volatile engines required extensive takeoff preparation and extended landing sequences. Among them sat Lieutenant Urban Drew, quietly taking notes, his instincts already sensing that somewhere between those dangerous minutes of liftoff and recovery, opportunity waited like a hunter's breath before release. Outside the hangar, rain began to fall, soft but relentless, pattering against metal fuselages glistening beneath floodlights. Every droplet mirrored uncertainty and determination alike, reflecting a war transitioning into its most technological phase. For the men of the Mustang squadrons, victory would no longer depend on dominance of altitude, but mastery of timing, precision, and human resolve against mechanical perfection. On October 10, 1944, Lechfeld Air Base, Bavaria, frost glazed the concrete runways as dawn revealed rows of the Luftwaffe's newest pride gleaming beneath makeshift camouflage nets stretched between damaged hangars. German ground crews moved with feverish urgency, their boots crunching across frozen mud, while mechanics primed volatile Jumo 004 engines, whose every ignition felt like gambling with thunder. Around them, officers from Jagdverband 7 watched with fascination and dread as the first combat-ready squadrons of Me-262 jets assembled under strict secrecy, ordered by the Reichsluftfahrt Ministerium. Propaganda photographers captured the scene, their cameras recording what Joseph Goebbels called proof that Germany possessed Wunderwaffen, miracle weapons destined to reverse the tide of the Allied bombardment. In reality, each gleaming jet required 3 times the maintenance hours of any Focke-Wulf or Messerschmitt Bf-109, its engines consuming scarce synthetic fuel refined from coal at plants already collapsing under Allied bombing raids. Pilots trained on gliders to conserve power, studying procedures that warned them never to accelerate too rapidly or descend too sharply during landing. Yet despite fragility, their confidence soared with the first successful intercepts against American bombers entering Ruhr airspace. On October 13th, the Me-262s from Commando Nowotny achieved 3 confirmed kills within minutes, ambushing a B-24 formation before escort fighters could react. Witnesses described energy like divine retribution, silver flashes diving through clouds faster than tracer fire could follow. Pilots returned exultant, proclaiming that Allied aircraft appeared motionless within their sights, their cannon bursts shredding targets before defensive gunners could aim. Newspapers printed exaggerated tallies declaring, "Der Himmel gehört wieder uns," the sky belongs to us again, while Berlin's morale briefly rekindled amid ruins. Yet cracks beneath triumph spread quickly. Many aircraft failed to return, not because of enemy fire, but because engines failed mid-flight, turbine blades tearing free under thermal strain. Test records quietly reported fatal stalls during final approaches, flames erupting from overtaxed compressors that transformed landings into infernos. Engineers pleaded for production delays, warning of metallurgical deficiencies caused by wartime shortages of high-temperature alloys. But Hitler demanded acceleration. His obsession with jet bombers diverted resources from defensive fighter variants, forcing commanders to adapt untested designs into desperate operational use. From observation posts along occupied France, Allied reconnaissance documented the new jet's predictable routines, late departures, limited endurance, and clustered bases vulnerable during transitions between sorties. Intelligence summaries circulated through American air commands with growing optimism that invincibility had boundaries measurable by patience. Somewhere across the channel, Mustang pilots studied every flaw revealed by German overconfidence, preparing silently to transform admiration into calculated retribution once the chance appeared above the crumbling heart of Europe. On October 18, 1944, High Wycombe Command Headquarters, England, inside the underground war rooms carved beneath English soil, Maps of occupied Europe glowed under dim bulbs, tracing every Luftwaffe jet base discovered through aerial photography. Intelligence officers leaned over transparent overlays, plotting fuel depots, taxi lanes, and dispersal zones at Lechfeld, Achmer, and Rheine-Hopsten, identifying patterns invisible to radar yet clear to patient eyes. Colonel Harold Bowman of the 8th Air Force addressed the assembled squadron leaders with a tone balanced between urgency and quiet certainty, unveiling a new doctrine called Operation Jet Kill. His premise was brutally simple yet surgically precise. Intercept Me-262s not in the sky, but on the ground where engines struggled to ignite, or during final descent when fragile turbines forced gradual throttle reduction. Pilots were instructed to orbit above jet bases at altitudes just beyond flak range, waiting for returning aircraft to emerge like falcons diving home before dusk. Timing, not technology, would determine supremacy, and those minutes between mechanical power and vulnerability would define the next evolution of air combat strategy. Among the officers present, Lieutenant Chuck Yeager and Lieutenant Urban Drew listened intently, realizing that success demanded an almost predatory calmness rather than speed. Yeager's notes emphasized patience, recording that, "The jets are lions at full sprint, but sheep at rest." Drew, whose experience escorting bomber formations had honed his observational instincts, volunteered for reconnaissance missions to document landing procedures of enemy bases near Osnabrück. Each sortie revealed crucial data: elongated glide paths, absence of rapid acceleration, and a tendency for Me-262 pilots to commit fully to straight approaches, unable to maneuver abruptly without risking engine stall. By late October, newly printed intelligence bulletins circulated across Mustang squadrons stationed at Leiston, Bodny, and Debden. Diagrams illustrated ideal interception arcs, engagement altitudes, and retreat corridors, minimizing flak exposure once a jet was struck. Maintenance crews modified auxiliary fuel tanks, extending patrol endurance to sustain prolonged loitering near known Luftwaffe fields. Psychological briefings prepared airmen for the paradox they would face: to resist instinctive pursuit during high-speed encounters, and instead wait, unseen, until the inevitable descent betrayed Germany's technological marvel. Night settled over the English countryside as engines roared along the tarmac, propeller blades catching orange reflections from floodlights, while mechanics saluted departing squadrons. Beneath each pilot's composed expression flickered the knowledge that they were hunting machines faster than anything mankind had yet mastered. But within their resolve also stirred quiet conviction that victory belonged not to invention, but to human adaptability, discipline, and courage shaped by the rhythm of learning an enemy's heartbeat. On October 28, 1944, Achmer Airfield, Germany, fog rolled across the grass airstrip as Luftwaffe ground crews guided the sleek Me-262s toward the runway, their exhaust shimmering faintly in the cold dawn. Beneath layers of frost, every launch became a ritual of risk and defiance, the turbines shrieking with fragile intensity before stabilizing into that unmistakable metallic roar. Inside one cockpit, Oberleutnant Hans Guido Mutke flexed gloved fingers across the throttle, unaware that beyond the low-lying mist, his enemy already circled above in silent patience. At 10,000 feet, Lieutenant Urban Drew's P-51 Mustang banked slowly, its polished aluminum skin reflecting the dim light creeping over the horizon. His squadron had departed from Bodny hours earlier, following reconnaissance photographs showing Me-262s operating from Achmer with limited escort cover. Each pilot flew with oxygen masks pressed tightly, waiting through the monotony of thin air and radio silence while below, engines began to scream through warming cycles. The order came over the radio: "Stand by. Jets rolling." Drew dropped altitude gradually, wings trembling slightly as condensation trailed from wingtips slicing the dense cloud layer. The first Me-262 broke through the fog, accelerating sluggishly before turbines reached thrust efficiency, its landing gear retracting halfway along the runway. Drew opened fire precisely as the jet lifted from the ground, his tracers streaking downward in parallel arcs of orange light that struck the left engine. The explosion tore open the nacelle, flames engulfing the fuselage as the aircraft veered sideways into the tarmac, scattering debris across the field. A second jet emerged moments later, its pilot attempting evasive climb, but Drew's wingman, Lieutenant Taylor, intercepted perfectly, shells ripping through the canopy with surgical precision. Within 2 minutes, both Me-262s lay burning, the first confirmed double-jet kills of the war. German crews froze in disbelief, their so-called invincible machines consumed before clearing the horizon. Survivors scrambled to drag pilots from wreckage, while flak gunners fired desperately into empty skies, unable to distinguish attackers descending through cloud cover at impossible angles. From the ground it appeared as though invisible predators had struck, leaving nothing but smoke and twisted metal shimmering under morning light. That engagement shattered the psychological armor surrounding Germany's miracle weapon. Across Allied intelligence divisions, Drew's after-action reports circulated instantly, confirming that jet vulnerability during takeoff and landing was no myth, but an exploitable constant. The myth of invincibility crumbled that morning, replaced by a new rhythm of warfare governed not by speed but by patience, sharpened through calculation and restraint. On November 6, 1944, near Bremen, Germany, high above the Weser River, contrails hung suspended like threads of glass glinting under the brittle autumn sun as the 357th Fighter Group swept eastward. Lieutenant Chuck Yeager, flying his P-51, glamorous Glenn III, scanned the patchwork terrain below, where German convoys snaked toward fractured airfields under constant bombardment. Radio silence held steady until a sharp voice broke through the static. "Jets, 11 o'clock high." Every pilot tensed instinctively, throttles sliding forward, propellers biting colder air as their formation broke into combat spread. 2 Me-262s had emerged from scattered cirrus, their silver bodies glimmering like molten metal streaking across the horizon. Yeager resisted pursuit, recalling the new doctrine drilled into every squadron: never chase a climbing jet, catch it when it lands. Instead, he climbed gently, maintaining altitude advantage while his eyes tracked their trajectory toward a known Luftwaffe strip south of Achmer. Minutes stretched like hours as he circled patiently above the descending jets, the world narrowing to a single rhythm of heartbeat and propeller vibration. Below, one Me-262 began its final approach, landing gear extending awkwardly, while its throttle reduced to preserve the delicate Jumo turbines from overheating. Yeager nosed downward, sunlight flashing across his canopy as he descended with surgical calmness. At 500 yards, he squeezed the trigger, the 650 caliber Brownings roaring with mechanical precision. Tracers connected instantly, piercing the fuselage near the engine mounts, flames erupting before the jet even touched ground. The pilot attempted to eject, but altitude offered no mercy, the aircraft collapsing into a field of burning wheat. The second Me-262 tried banking away, but turbulence betrayed it. Yeager's round struck again, tearing through the right nacelle, sending shards spiraling across the horizon before impact consumed the machine in a violent plume. Radio calls confirmed both kills within minutes, America's first double-jet victory by a single pilot in controlled engagement. The achievement reverberated through command channels from Leiston to Washington, marking a definitive psychological reversal in aerial warfare perception. At Lechfeld, German engineers received the news with disbelief and grief, yet even they could not deny the technical limitations haunting their creation. The Me-262 was too fast to intercept and too fragile to sustain, a paradox born from desperation, brilliance, and scarcity. For Yeager and his comrades, victory was not triumphalism, but vindication of strategy forged through observation and sacrifice. Above the smoldering landscape, the sky once ruled by terror now echoed the steady hum of propeller blades reclaiming supremacy from the roar of unstable jets. On January 1st, 1945, Munich-Riem Airfield, Germany, snow covered the runways in ghostly white as mechanics cleared frozen drifts from beneath the silent silhouettes of Me-262s, lined like relics awaiting resurrection. The Luftwaffe was no longer a vast command, but a scattered remnant clinging to remnants of fuel, faith, and fading discipline. General Adolf Galland, once celebrated as Germany's youngest air commander, walked slowly between the idle aircraft, his uniform frayed, his expression hardened by months of futile debates with Berlin over strategic sanity. He had argued relentlessly that jets must serve as interceptors rather than bombers, their speed their only shield. But Hitler's obsession with offensive airstrikes forced engineers to fit bomb racks that crippled performance. Now, Galland assembled an independent fighter unit under his personal authority, Jagdverband 44, composed of the last experienced aces Germany possessed, men who had once ruled the skies above France and Russia. Their mission was defiance, not victory, and every takeoff carried the solemnity of a requiem played in engine notes rather than violins. Among them was Walter Krupinski, wounded yet unbroken, and Heinz Baer, whose hands shook from exhaustion, but whose eyes still burned with a duelist's precision. They flew knowing that Allied dominance stretched horizon to horizon, their radar networks charting every flight path, every runway, every shadow of resistance. Ground crews scoured bomb-cratered tarmac for usable sections long enough to launch the jets before P-51s descended again, like hawks answering fate's call. When JV-44 finally entered combat near Munich, the world below was already collapsing into smoke and retreat. Allied fighters swarmed like locusts, bombing fuel convoys before engines could ignite. Galland's men fought with desperate artistry, darting between vapor trails, firing four-barreled Mk-108 cannons whose shells shredded bombers in single bursts. Yet every victory was followed by loss, engines failing mid-flight, flak catching vulnerable approaches, or inexperienced replacement pilots crashing before reaching combat altitude. To protect their fragile launches, Galland ordered piston-engine FW-190s to guard Me-262 takeoffs, calling these escorts the Platzschutzstaffel, or Airfield Protection Squadron. Painted bright red for identification, these guardians sacrificed themselves daily, luring American fighters away long enough for jets to vanish into the upper air. It was a strategy born from brilliance and despair, a gesture of defiance etched into history's final winter of the Luftwaffe. Even in triumph, Galland felt only silence, watching contrails dissolve above bomb-scarred hangars, while snow continued falling softly upon the ruins of his nation's greatest technological dream. On March 15, 1945, Rainer-Hopsten Airfield, Germany, the frozen soil trembled as waves of Allied bombers crossed into western Germany, their shadows gliding over a landscape reduced to skeletal forests and fractured rail lines. Below, what remained of the Luftwaffe struggled to shield its prized Me-262 bases, fortifying earthen revetments and dispersal hangars, now little more than cratered ruins scattered beneath the smoke-choked sky. From London's High Wycombe Command Centre, mission planners had marked every jet airfield for elimination, designating each as a high-priority target vital to breaking Germany's final illusion of aerial resistance. By dawn, the first P-51 squadron swept ahead of the bombers, strafing taxiways where mechanics scrambled to refuel jets already crippled by fuel shortages and mechanical decay. Urban Drew's 361st Fighter Group led the charge, weaving through anti-aircraft bursts, while their guns tore through idle Me-262s, awaiting spare turbines. Pilots reported seeing engineers running toward hangars, carrying welding torches and spare compressor blades, only to vanish beneath strafing runs that turned workshops into pillars of black flame. The smell of burning aviation fuel mixed with mud and cordite hung across the valley like a requiem for engineering genius, twisted by desperation. Those few Me-262s that managed to take off faced skies, already dominated by hundreds of Allied interceptors positioned at layered altitudes. P-51s coordinated with P-47 Thunderbolts, forming aerial nets that anticipated jet escape vectors, forcing engagements during vulnerable acceleration climbs. Several German pilots, including Oberleutnant Georg Peter Eder, fought valiantly, executing near-supersonic dives that momentarily evaded pursuit before their turbines flamed out from stress. Many perished not through enemy gunfire but through catastrophic mechanical failures that turned brilliance into suicide. Within the ruins of Rhine-Hopsten, command posts transmitted final coordinates to the remaining JV-44 units retreating south toward Munich. Intelligence intercepts confirmed that fewer than 50 operational jets remained across all fronts, each requiring engines cannibalized from wrecked airframes. By late March, Allied forces bombed the Messerschmitt assembly lines at Augsburg, ending production entirely and sealing the fate of Germany's revolutionary weapon before it could mature. From cockpit gun cameras to battlefield diaries, every recorded engagement revealed the same tragic pattern, a masterpiece of design crippled by haste, scarcity, and strategic blindness. The Me-262, conceived as the future of warfare, now symbolized the twilight of a regime collapsing under its own illusions. Above the flaming fields, the last Mustang patrols circled methodically, their presence both witness and judge to an empire's technological requiem dissolving beneath spring's first thaw. On April 30th, 1945, Munich-Riem Airfield, Germany. The dawn arrived soundless, gray and heavy with surrender, as smoke from nearby fires drifted across the ruined airfield, where Germany's last jets stood abandoned. Torn fabric hung from shattered hangars, the concrete runways scarred by bomb craters now filled with stagnant rainwater, reflecting broken silhouettes of Me-262s once hailed as the world's fastest machines. Allied ground troops moved cautiously through the debris, their boots crunching on frozen gravel, weapons lowered toward aircraft that no longer belonged to any nation or dream. Among the wreckage, American engineers marveled at the remnants of the Jumo 004 turbines, touching burnt alloys that told stories of brilliance born from exhaustion. They photographed engine schematics scattered across the hangar floor, documenting innovations that would soon cross oceans under Operation Lusty, the intelligence program devoted to capturing German aviation technology. Every nut, bolt, and fragment represented the foundation of a post-war revolution in jet propulsion destined to reshape the skies from Washington to Moscow. In nearby barracks, surviving Luftwaffe personnel emerged under white flags, their uniforms torn and eyes hollow with weeks of hunger and defeat. Former aces like Adolf Galland surrendered with stoic dignity, offering sidearms to American officers who recognized in them not enemies, but fellow aviators broken by ideology and circumstance. Some spoke proudly of the Me-262's capabilities, while others confessed quietly that every flight had felt like gambling with death, praying the engines would hold long enough to return home. By evening, the U.S. Army Air Forces had secured the entire Munich-Riem complex, loading intact jets onto transport convoys bound for France and England. Teams from the Royal Aircraft Establishment and the U.S. Air Technical Intelligence Command catalogued captured aircraft piece by piece, noting experimental alloys, swept-wing geometry, and fuel injection systems far beyond Allied prototypes. Within months, these discoveries would influence designs like the Bell P-59 era Comet, Gloucester Meteor upgrades, and the emerging North American F-86 Sabre machines that would carry jet combat into the coming Cold War. Yet amid the triumph of progress, silence lingered across the airfield as night descended over Germany's shattered horizon. The Me-262 had promised salvation through speed, but its legacy lay buried beneath rubble and frost, a relic of ambition untempered by endurance. The war's thunder had faded, replaced by the hum of transport engines carrying the remnants of a fallen empire's genius into the uncertain dawn of another age. On May 8, 1945, Berlin, Germany, across the smoldering ruins of Europe's fallen capital, the air was still heavy with smoke, silence, and the echoes of distant artillery fading into memory. Germany had surrendered, ending 6 years of devastation that had turned innovation into desperation and genius into tragedy. Among the scattered relics of defeat lay fragments of the Messerschmitt Me 262, its once revered form twisted and charred beside the same streets where it had once been celebrated as a symbol of resurrection. Historians would later call it the future arriving too early, a vision of what mankind could achieve when imagination outran morality. The jet's conception had been a masterpiece of engineering precision, yet its execution reflected the fatal flaws of leadership blinded by ideology rather than logic. Engineers like Hans von Ohain and Willy Messerschmitt had reached beyond the boundaries of piston and propeller, crafting a machine that hinted at post-war aviation decades ahead of its time. Still, its engines burned out as quickly as the dreams that powered them, proving that progress without stability yields nothing but ghosts of potential. In the years that followed, Allied test pilots flew captured Me-262s over England and the United States, marveling at acceleration that defied instinct. Chuck Yeager himself would later credit those flights as stepping stones toward the jet age that culminated with his supersonic record in the Bell X-1. The lessons carved into the Me-262's fragile turbines echoed through every airframe that came after, from the MiG-15 to the F-86 Sabre, each carrying the spirit of that doomed creation, refined through survival rather than collapse. For Germany's surviving pilots, the memory of those final sorties never faded. Many spoke of fear hidden behind their pride, of hearing engines sputter mid-air while knowing rescue would never come. The war had ended not with heroism, but exhaustion, and the Me-262 stood as both monument and warning. That mastery of the skies could not redeem the ruin of the earth below. As peace settled uneasily across Europe, the world's nations turned their gaze skyward again, this time not for conquest, but discovery. Jet propulsion would become the heartbeat of a new era, carrying humanity from battlefields into the stratosphere. Yet beneath every triumph of flight remained an unspoken truth, that the first wings of the jet age had risen not from hope, but from the ashes of war.